All right. Well, I'm just delighted to see everybody here, and thank you so much for coming to this. This is our annual Menjo lecture that we hold annually in the spring in honor of Shigehito Menjo, my PhD student. It is an endowed scholarship. We're supporting an endowed scholarship that supports an applied linguistics student, graduate student in what used to be Texas A&M Commerce and is now East Texas A&M. We just had our name changed. So we're now ETAMU. So don't be confused. If you get something from East Texas A&M, it's actually Texas A&M Commerce. We're still the same place. We do a pass-through scholarship, and we contacted the office, but this year's winner has not yet been announced, but we will certainly contact all the donors when this year's winner has been announced. Talking of which, you can still donate to the scholarship, and we very much appreciate all donations. Sal is going to put up a QR code now in the chat that you can use to do that. But obviously you can contact Sal and I at any point. We are on track for endowing the scholarship permanently as of 2027, which is what we have planned, which is wonderful. And for everyone here who takes part in those donations, we can't tell you how much it means to us. Before we move on to the lecture, I am delighted to announce that manuscript, The Role of Prosody in International Communication in English in Call Centers, has literally, just as of yesterday, been accepted by Language Learning for a special issue this year, I think either summer or fall. And the authors are myself, Eric Frigano, and Shigehito Menjo, because this is work that he did with me in 2012 and 13, and we presented in Australia. So I can't tell you the joy it gives me to have him on a paper in Language Learning.
Lucy, I didn't include Menjo's name because I cited that word. Oh,
that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. He's on there. It's okay. Okay. I want to thank Language Learning, and particularly Okim and Charlie Nagel and Shelley Staples for giving us this opportunity to do that in tribute for Shige. Okay, so moving on to today's lecture, prosody, accent, and second language speech intelligibility. The first thing we want to do is thank Dr. Okim Kang very much for participating in this and giving us this lecture today. Just to let you know how prestigious this is, the last time I introduced Okim was as a plenary speaker for AAAL in 2024. So we consider ourselves not necessarily on par with AAAL, but certainly up there in importance that she has come here to present with us today. So we want to thank her very much for that. She is a longtime friend and colleague of mine. As I'm sure you all know, she has numerous achievements to her name at this point, not least of which was a plenary last year. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Okim Kang. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Once again, this is such an honor for me to even talk about some of the research issues, but get to see so many people. I'd like to share some of the recent findings we've done along with the future research issues as well as something to think about together. Start with the prosody and then intelligibility and some accent bias issues that I've been working on recently. Before I start, I briefly want to talk about this whole background. Lucy mentioned we are such a long time friends and collaborators and all together. I actually came to the States in 2004. I had to have a have a have an interview with Don Rubin in terms of getting the PhD at the University of Georgia. So it was an interview back then, and he asked me all different questions, and I tried to respond. But then at the end, surprisingly, he said, "Oh, your suprasegmental use is great." I mean, that was his response, seriously, at the end. So I didn't even think about my English that much, and I knew, of course, as a non-native speaker, I didn't quite get the suprasegmental part that well either. But that was an interesting response. But then soon after that, I had to take a speak test as an international teaching assistant so that I could teach undergrad students. So it was an in-house speaking test, 6 prompts, and I had to respond. And there was a rater. Then I received the score. And then, surprisingly enough, there was also a comment from the rater saying her prosody use is very good. So then I realized actually something's going on with my speech, right? And then I studied a PhD at the University of Georgia. And then, of course, as an international teaching assistant, I was self-conscious about like how I could teach, what my English would be. Then Don Rubin introduced this Lucy's wonderful study that we all know, which was mind-blowing, honestly. For me, it was so enlightening because this study basically told me that international teaching assistants are not using the prosody intonation properly, so that undergrad students didn't respond, right? Like we are not using, I mean, we mean I didn't use, or international teaching assistants didn't use rising tones to establish the common ground. And ITAs are using so many falling tones, which basically meant shutting up the actions. So I love this study so much. Lucy might remember. I even called her. I tried to find the information. I couldn't find her because she left the University of Alabama back then. So I finally got hold of one phone number. So I called, and there was a Lucy's cell phone number that she ended up answering out of nowhere. So this how I started with this research on prosody. I just wanted to share. Then use of prosody. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to attend Menjo's talk at 2016 PSLOT. So I just got this information through Lucy's book. If I understood it correctly, what he did is he used this PEPC program to examine especially Japanese learners of prosody perception. So what he did is these speakers would look at the picture, and then they had to express whether they like it and don't like it. Of course, that could be reflected through prosody. Then native speakers were sure enough able to assess the speaker's prosody use correctly or successfully, whereas non-native speakers, whether they are beginners or intermediate or even advanced L2 Japanese learners, they were not able to detect or assess speakers' use of dislike of the picture, which means, which I totally agree when I try to teach international students, they have a hard time understanding the intonation, not to mention rising falling differences, right? So I thought this was such an important study. And then Lucy just mentioned the new study coming out about the prosody use in the call center. And Shelley Staple was my former student, looked at the healthcare providers, the prosody use differences between international nurses and American nurses. So what is prosody? Prosody can refer to suprasegmental aspects of speech, intonation, rhythm, and tempo, right? And Lucy defined the prosody broadly as comprising pitch and prominence and pause patterns. Sometimes we use that interchangeably with the suprasegmentals. We did studies on the contributions of prosody to oral proficiencies. This study that Lucy and I and Don Rubin did almost 15 years ago, Lucy analyzed 29 suprasegmental features. And this study did not include any segmental features or anything, but these suprasegmental features explained more than 50% of the variance in TOEFL raters' speaking scores. So this basically shows us how much the prosody matters. When it comes to speech science, my presentation, I try to look at some interface between our applied linguistics research and the speech science, AI research, because that seems to be the current interest. So I looked at some of the studies in speech science. Speech scientists do look at prosody. They do agree that prosody matters. But what I noticed is what they're trying to describe is much about the emotions rather than the linguistic aspects. So here we see prosody seems to be related to the feelings of being sincere, polite, and warm. Or prosody can make us understand people better, or make things do. But they do also agree that prosody is very hard to hear and describe, and even do the computer modeling. It's essential, but automatically trying to compute is very, very hard. But again, prosody is used for speech recognition, synthesis, emotion detection, speaker recognitions. So here, if you look at this chart, speech in the speech science field, I'm trying to do this. Let's say how they try to articulate and computerize the characteristics of being a prosody. When you're angry, you obviously speak fast, right? Or maybe pitch average is much higher, or pitch range is wider. When you're happy, your pitch is much higher. Again, when you're sad, your energy is low and your pitch range is much lower. Probably even the range is narrower. When you are very nervous or fearful, then you speak faster, or your pitch could be very high, right? So that's how they try to describe the pitch or utilize the pitch, or rather quantify. Here they even try to describe a pitch for the depression, low and monotone and long pause. How about you feel very happy and once again positive feelings, lower vowels. So you can see how they try to quantify the prosody through the speech science. Whereas this is the chart that we are probably very familiar with from the Lucy's book. You can see the vast differences, how we approach this prosody as a linguist, right? We have a falling, rising. If you're using falling, we know the person is expressing the authority. We are delivering some statements, information. Whereas if you're using rising tone, we are trying to share the background, just like the international teaching assistants versus American teaching assistants. It's building solidarity. It's an inclusiveness. So if you try to talk about something with a rising tone, you kind of expect the other hearer is showing approval. So this is how we approach. In level tone, withdrawing from the negotiation is more neutral tone. So you are just giving out the number and informations, or just focusing on the language. So you can see the big differences between what we do versus what computer scientists would do. So these are some examples. The term we're using for the pitch concord, trying to match the pitch level, right? Which happens in our discourse all the time. So this is an example from the Lucy's book.
It wasn't my fault, was it?
No, of course it wasn't. Definitely not.
You can see within this tone unit, is this my fault? Was it? Is a very high, and the person B is picking up the right level. So starting with a high key and then coming down. This is a very good conversation we see from the native speakers, right? But the very similar expressions, I try this with AI, and let's listen how AI can do.
It wasn't my fault, was it? No, not at all. You're good.
You can see how unnatural that is and how we do not expect to hear that, but AI can do it. This is another version of AI.
It wasn't my fault, was it? No, not at all. You're good.
You can obviously see that pitch concord is not happening. I did this brief analysis through Prot and see how we can identify the differences, right? Again, this is the same sound
It wasn't my fault, was it?
No, of course it wasn't. Definitely not.
You can see this agreement happening, and also the variations is very wide and very clear. How about this one? It's just another highly proficient speaker with AI.
It wasn't my fault, was it? No, not at all. You're good.
What's interesting for me is when I try to analyze AI speech through Prot, Prot doesn't pick up a lot of contours, pitch contour. And obviously, still Prot and AI voice is having some conflicting issues. So you can see from AI, it's not only very flat, but pitch contour is not showing up as much as we are seeing from the human. This is the last sound files. Let's listen one more time.
It wasn't my fault, was it? No, not at all. You're good.
Yeah, you can see the pitch contour are not in good agreement. So this is one good example that we can, consider how we use this prosody, conversation versus how we might have to reconsider with AI. This is a study we did a couple of years ago. I did with the Naoko. When it comes to pragmatic prosody, we can think about how we are using right tone choices. So in Naoko's data set, she had role plays, and then one for the low in position, one for the high in position. Low in position is more like, can I borrow your pen? A high in position is more like a high stakes. So, a student requesting a recommendation letter to the professor. Here, if you especially look at on the right hand side, high in positions, red line is low proficient learners, and then purple, and then also the dark black lines are representing either native speakers or high proficient learners. You can see low proficient learners are using a lot of rising tones, even when they are in the high imposition situations. Remember the tone choice table that Lucy presented? That one, as you can see, high rising means getting the approval or some kind of imposing, because I say it, I want you to agree. Whereas level is more like you are just making that statement. You are not expecting anything from the hearer. So native speakers already knew that intuitive aspects of prosody. So they are using a lot of level tones, whereas low proficiency learners are using high tone, rising tones. So this is one example from the high proficient learners.
Hi, Professor. I'm applying for a research internship and would greatly appreciate your recommendation. Please let me know if you need any details. Thank you.
You can see this person is just making the statement, whereas low proficient learners are going to say, hello, professors, can I have a recommendation from you? You see, so that is a big difference we can see. Prosody, like I said, I was very interested. So this is just one quick example. A few years ago, my postdoc and I, we try to develop an automated scoring systems just using the suprasegmental features. In this model, we didn't include any of the grammatical features or segmental features. Look at this correlations. Correlations between human rating scores and actual our automated scoring systems, it was 0.7, over 70% of correlation. If you look at the one on the left, that was an ETS speech rater using all the linguistic features together. Their correlation between human raters and their ASR ratings of 0.77. So you can see how much prosody can contribute to oral proficiency. This is another follow-up that we did. In this case, is intelligibility automated scoring systems. So intelligibility, as you know, it's a lot related to transcriptions. We used actual spontaneous speech, but here again, just using suprasegmental features, we reached an agreement 0.76 between human intelligibility scores and then this automated intelligibility scores. The one on the left is among humans because there were 60 human raters. They, of course, had a much higher reliability. But anyway, the whole point here is that I do know prosody makes a huge difference to our oral performance. Okay, let's move on to accent and L2 speech. We are all very familiar with accent, right? Accent is a phonological difference. Accent ratings nowadays, however, seemed a little more complicated and tricky in a global context, because when you say accent is phonological difference, then if you're asking this question in a world English's context, we all confused what do we mean by the difference. So I'm seeing more challenges nowadays than before. We all have an accent. Accent and proficiencies are not different. I mean, they are not the same thing, and difference is not deficiency. So we know that. Accent also is dynamic. We probably already experienced this. L2 speech. I mean, we all do L2 speech, especially in today's, audience would be very familiar with this term. How speakers perceive, process, understand, and pronounce. So perception and productions are involved in L2 speech. The sound of speech is a critical issue in language assessment. Then here, people tend to immediately judge non-native speakers' status on the basis of pronunciation. So we know pronunciation makes a big difference. These are three different constructs that we are quite familiar. Comprehensibility is how easy it is to understand. Accentedness, the differences. Intelligibility is to what extent we understand the utterance. So intelligibility is the utterance understanding, right? The one on the right, the chart, the bar graphs is something we are very, very familiar with. Doing and Monod's very seminal work, 1995. The ratings of utterances with 100% intelligibility being determined by the 18 listeners' transcription. So you can see all these 9 speakers, they got 100% intelligibility scores, but when they had to rate for the accentedness scores everywhere, right? So that's how we know accentedness is one thing, intelligibility is another. Many researchers have worked on these construct issues, linguistic features associated with these constructs, or speakers' affective variable, special anxiety, how it's related to speech constructs, or how constructs would differ based on the tasks we are using, their visual cues, some kind of context. So there are a lot of studies on this topic. One thing that I thought would be interesting is this my very recent finding. In fact, we just finished this study last week. We wanted to see whether AI can distinguish these constructs. So we got these 21 speech files, 7 accented speech files from 3 different L1s. One is Chinese, the other is Spanish, another one is Indian. Then we asked AI to rate them. Of course, we trained the AIs what intelligibility, what accentedness is. Intelligibility is oftentimes is a transcription anyway. So AI is going to immediately give us word error rates. So the one on the left, you see the very left vertical y-axis is going to be word error rate. So the higher, the worse. The more errors you see, the lower means less errors. So AI rated these speech files for intelligibility. And you can see on the right and far the blue box is the Indian. I mean, I'm going to come back to these issues, especially these 21 speech files were determined by the human raters around the same ratings, above 80% of intelligibility. But Indian speakers was much fewer error rates. So there's a slight difference. But what is more striking is the one on the right. The same speaker sound files, when AI had to rate this for accentedness, Indian speakers were rated with the most accentedness way. So AI could process speech files completely differently, apparently. They can understand it, but they can find it very accented. So something to think about. I mean, this is a good thing for us. I mean, we like our speech to be intelligible, and then it's okay to be accented, right? And if AI can do that, it's a very promising sign. So anyway, this is something to think about. What is intelligibility? Intelligibility is defined in many different ways, especially in the speech science. I've noticed they really emphasize the recognition part, how well we can recognize the individual sound. So it's all about speech clarity. Whereas in our field of L2 speech, we do talk about being intelligible. It is not the same as being accent-free. We also talk about mutual intelligibility, right? Intelligibility even can change according to the audience and also listeners' bias, right? So we talk about that. One thing, we just finished this study and it's coming out in language teaching this year as well. We did we synthesized the timeline for the L2 speech intelligibility, synthesizing research on L2 intelligibility studies over, last 50 years or so. And you can see we identified 50 papers out of 138. So we specifically tried to choose the studies that talked about L2 speech intelligibility, but also had teaching implications. So we were pretty selective on these 50 articles. What's interesting is over 38% of these papers we selected were from 2020. So last 5 years or so, much more studies are coming out on L2 speech intelligibility. So definitely this is an important topic. But then what do our learners perceive? So we talk about the importance of intelligibility, but how do learners perceive or their perceptions of accents? So I've done these studies, actually, one project after another. So I studied with IELTS 1 year, IELTS 1 year, and then Duolingo the next year. You can see. Then I also finished with British Councils. Basically, what I did is I asked these potential test takers how they would feel about having accented speech in their listening, high stakes listening test. And studies after studies, basically they all said they don't want to have an accented speech in their high stakes test. They still prefer standard English. When they call it standard English, Duolingo test and IELTS, especially Duolingo, they want you to have an American accent. British Council, they want you to have a British accent. And then also the test takers had a very interesting responses to this question as well. So Korean test takers, they hated an Indian accent. So they never wanted to have an Indian accent. So this seems to be quite complicated. However, when it comes to the actual performance, same thing. First I did with the TOEFL, next with the Duolingo, and then like I said, I just finished with the British Council. As long as speakers were highly intelligible, of course they could maintain a certain accent of their L1, but speakers are highly intelligible, determined by their transcription and human expert raters. Their listening comprehension scores were not significantly different. And that's what I think we have to think about. Learners may want to have a prestigious standard accents, but their performance is not bad. especially the last one, the British Council on the right. The third part, with test 1 is they listen to British accent. Test 2, they listen to their own shared accent, means Chinese test takers listen to Chinese accent. Third one was they chose their preferred accent. So we gave them a different L2 options and they chose. And you can see the actual within group differences were not significant. They performed very well. So this was a very encouraging sign. What characterizes intelligible speech? You know, many people did a different linguistic analysis, including, you know, our study with me and Lucy. We are looking at different linguistic features. Segmentals versus suprasegmentals, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Functional load idea, ranking segmental contrast according to the importance in English pronunciation. So some of my studies did show that high functional load segmentals are more important than low functional load segmentals. When it comes to suprasegmental, speech rate, lexical stress, prominence, you know, all of these are important. One good example is speech rate. So this is just one example for the speech rate. We analyzed 108 L2 speakers, and those speech files were rated by 15 expert raters, and we try to look at their speech rate and their intelligibility scores. And if you look at this chart on the left, the blue line is intelligibility, and the green is comprehensibility, and the red is accentedness. Especially when you look at blue and green, you can see this curvilinear relationship. There's an optimal point for speech rate. And what is also striking is, for us, this optimal speech rate was 3.5 to 4.25. But Doing and Menjo, in 24 years ago, they also did this speech rate optimal point, and it was 3.55 and 4.23. How similar this value is was, for us, very shocking. Means there is apparently some kind of optimal point for this ideal speech rate. It can't be too fast. It can't be too slow. So something to think about. Based on these speech analysis, I wanted to see actually like the threshold of intelligibility. Like at what point people start to understand your speech better. Like what kind of pronunciation errors are allowed and what kind of pronunciation errors are not allowed. So I did speech analysis once with the TOEFL file, speech files. That was 2020 study. And then the recent analysis we did with Masha Kostromitina was on the Duolingo sound files. So this circle point, that seems to be the optimal area. Then when we looked at pronunciation characteristics, what we found out is, let's say you have 100 words, you only make one lexical stress mistake. So you can see when it comes to threshold of intelligibility, we can't allow many lexical stress errors, maybe just only one. Prominence, you have to have two, three emphasized prominence syllables per unit. So you can't just emphasize every single word. And then here at the bottom, you can see falling tones, about 60%, but you definitely have to use a lot of rising tones. So this is some kind of rough ideas about intelligibility. I want to also mention the mutual intelligibility, you know, taking responsibilities for both listeners and speakers. I briefly mentioned. I'm sure everyone agrees. Communication is two-way street. So we talked about I did some research on listener training. The last part about this intelligibility is the measurement issue. There are many other intelligibility related measurement methodological issues, but one thing I want to share briefly is this is a very recent study that Kevin Hirsch and we just submitted to PSLOT. So we haven't presented this study yet for 2025. is oftentimes, I mean, I've done this intelligibility research for many, many years. I just use this transcription method, you know, the percentages of entire words transcribed accurately. But what we found out recently is if we look at the content words rather than the entire sentence, the accuracy is higher. So we are trying to develop this automated intelligibility scoring systems. And if we are just focusing on the accuracies of a content words rather than the entire sentence, which includes function words and content words, right? The accuracy seems a lot higher. So something to think about in the future is whether you want to use the intelligibility measure for the entire sentence or just the content words. Okay, so let's talk about the intelligibility and pedagogical part. Nativeness and nativeness principles and intelligibility principles, right? Doing and Munro's report showing even though intelligibility approach is important, only 25% of the studies so far seem to adapt the intelligibility oriented approach. So we still have to pay extra attention and intentional effort for this intelligibility principle. Some accents, of course, is okay. Understanding is much more important. That's the idea. One quick study to share is this is actually Reza Dalman's dissertation. Was done a couple of years ago. We tried two different instructional approaches, one for the intelligibility-based, another traditional-based, just following the textbooks. Intelligibility approach, you can see we introduced high functional segmentals only. We emphasized the lexical stress and prominence. Here you can see 3 weeks of lessons, 2 weeks per week, so 6 lessons. You can see intelligibility approach, they improved the green line on the left. There's an interaction effect, means intelligibility approach group improved significantly more. So that's just the idea. I want to introduce the intelligibility approach through the technology that I did through my NSF project. In this case, I try to introduce objective speech intelligibility measures as feedback. So computer is going to provide this feedback automatically, instantly, so that users and learners can identify their pronunciation errors. This is the feedback we try to prepare roughly. If you see on the left, you see the score, intelligibility score, speech rate. So, you know, they get to see something like this and say, oh, my speech rate is 4.6 syllable per second. Your intelligibility score is 97%. I thought when I first tried to do this study, this could bring a lot of awareness for them so that they could probably recognize their problems and correct them. Unfortunately, I didn't realize the problems of this. When I said 97 intelligibility score, learners actually didn't understand that what this intelligibility score really meant. Also, your speech rate is 4.6 syllable. They had no idea what we meant by 4.6 syllable per second. So in fact, there's nothing significant. The study didn't really give us much of anything with a lot of efforts. So in the second study, if you scan this, you can directly see this speech analyzer, which is available in our lab, Applied Linguistics Speech Lab. And it kind of gives you the instant speech analysis. It tells you like how many syllables per second, so speech, rate, and pause. So we let learners practice this when they have to do it. Also, we explained what speech rate means, what intelligibility means. We actually gave learners actual training about this feedback. Then you can see there's the red one is experimental group. The blue and red, one is automated scoring, and then the other one is a human rating. Still, there was a significant improvement. So what we learned is when you provide this kind of technology-based feedback, just giving feedback doesn't work. we have to tell learners, we have teachers how to use that type of feedback. So that's what I learned and what we learned. This is another very recent study also coming out in language learning this year. So we realized the importance of feedback when we are using this AI. So we even developed much more enhanced versions of feedback using different computer modeling. So here you can see this color, right? So what this color does is if you see this green, that represents the prominence. You're emphasizing words. If you see it's yellow, it's length. And then if I'm sorry, the whole width is length. The blue is pause. And then the column is green, means you're good, no errors. Yellow means you have 1 or 2 errors. Red means a lot of errors. Then we also had this segmental component included. So if you make a lot of segmental errors, you can have this as well. And then the instruction was primarily prosody, prominence, speech rate, and thought group. We did this intervention study, visual group. They just looked at the visual part. Blue is visual and narrative. And then red, the comparison group, they just went through this lesson we provided. This is an actual example.
Learn from every mistake, because every experience, particularly mistakes, are there to teach you.
Then we have this program, then they clicked and they get this. This is the visual group. They only saw this visual part. The blue part is the actual feedback group. So we gave them extensive feedback based on their performance. And this feedback was prepared by the teachers and AI. We constantly retrained AI. So this was supposed to reflect the teacher's feedback. And you see the blue line. Blue line is a visual and the actual narrative group. The people receive the visual feedback and the written feedback. They are the only one who improved. So you can see the importance of feedback, not just giving them feedback. Actually, we have to help learners to use the feedback efficiently. That's what we realized. And this one thing I also want to emphasize is this intelligibility feedback model. The actual computer model is using intelligible speakers rather than native speaker. So this is another approach that we are trying. So in this global context, ownership of English is changing, global intelligibility is, emphasized. So I feel like we have to re-educate our learners about the mutual intelligibility, the characteristics of intelligible speech, all of that. So I'm sure we are familiar with that. The last part is the recommendations and research and instruction. Here, I would like to introduce a couple of new findings as well. When it comes to, I can't get rid of this one, technology and pronunciation instruction. Now we have AI, natural language processing, automated speech recognition. Things are developing so fast and the field is evolving, right? And we know this is all useful. But many studies in saying teachers and learners, they find these very challenging, especially to incorporate them in the classroom. So this is something we have to keep in mind constantly. So this is the study that's going to come. It's not an empirical study. We did the review, AI bias in second language speech. This is going to come out this summer, annual review of applied linguistics. AI is biased, that we know, I'm sure. Racial bias, gender bias, and of course, L2 speech accent bias. Here, this is an interesting study. Examinations AI face analysis software. And then you can see 0.8% for the light-skinned man, but then almost 35% for dark-skinned woman. So this is AI bias. AI, when it comes to accent detection accuracies, lower accuracy in African American varieties than white American. I actually had this conversation with my collaborator who is a computer scientist. He's like a interspeech president. So he's a signal processing person, and he 100% agrees through the personal communication, saying they don't have enough data to train their models with African American varieties, for example. Very low accuracies in women speakers than men. So this is the actual study that we did. We presented this at AAAL this year. So in this case, we used 60 accent varieties from accent archive. Then we used a Google Assistant that's on the left and Siri on the right. And 5 expert raters rated these sound files, and they were all very similar, 85% and higher transcription accuracy. If you can see this, on the very left, the red box is Chinese, and then green and purple box is Indian and Spanish accents. Even the human raters found all these accents almost in a very similar way, very intelligible. You can see these error rates, again, higher the worse, more errors. Error rates for Chinese accent is significantly higher, but Indian and Spanish accents are very low. Means these Google engineers are all maybe a lot of them are Indians, so they might have trained the model with Indian accents a lot. And then on the, I'm sorry, but then on the Chinese accents, apparently not sufficient enough. So they definitely detect more errors with the Chinese accents. The second study, we used the 40 spoken TOEFL responses. Same thing, human raters first rated for the intelligibility. Same thing, Arabic accents and Chinese accents, their error rates are definitely higher. But you see the purple Spanish accent error rates are very low, which means there are, in the States, North America, there are a lot of Spanish accent data sets used for training. So you can see the bias. Same idea. You can see, if you look at these 3 graphs, the human raters are all very similar, but then Google Assistant and Siri can show different results. Human and AI interactions, that's very important issues as well. Like I said, we are doing some analysis for this, definitely different intonation patterns. In general, when it comes to human interaction versus human AI interactions, human tend to make longer pauses with AI, fewer turns with AI. Human tend to speak louder with AI, fewer back channeling. So there are a lot of issues happening. So overall, for the future research implications, again, now AI is everywhere, but not everybody has access to AI. You know, Prosody has huge issues with AI, the pragmatic functions and linguistic functions. And then, how we understand pragmatic frameworks in global context. I see some problems with that as well. And when you say intelligible and then accurate accent in a global context, that's extremely hard to define. AI bias issues, again, eventually, the people who trained AI will be humans as well. So if humans are biased, AIs will be biased. So we have to think about those issues. I've noticed, same thing with a lot of technologies. We can say AI is going to be very useful and helpful, but just like the language learning study we did, AI with a human-like feedback or even humans feedback seems to be only effective. Just using AI feedback doesn't seem very effective, at least so far. We need to train AI with diverse data sets. And then think about how AI is so biased and stereotypes. A lot of collaborations with different disciplines. And also, I feel like we need to help teachers and learners with their confidence in technology use. So overall, my concluding remark is, again, there are tons of resources and collaborations can happen. New technologies and new research findings can come out, right? But then we need to communicate with the teachers and learners and practitioners, and we need to also educate them to better understand these current movements. And so that's why we constantly need some professional trainings and exchanges So I think that would be my presentations. Thank you, everyone. I'll stop sharing. I'll try to make sure that I can end before 11:50 so that I
Well, thank you, Kim. That was fantastic. That was a speed through some AI and pronunciation. That was awesome. Sal, did you want to take and see if there were questions, or is there time?
Yes,
It's your meeting now.
about 10 minutes. So there are several questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them?
yeah, which one? Yeah, because
So the first one is a question about the word length. Was the word length similar? Sorry, it moved. Was the word length similar among the Chinese, Indian, and Spanish speakers? I wonder if the Indian speakers spoke more than the others, and whether they could have contributed to a higher overall intelligibility score.
oh yeah, the actual sound files are exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay.
But
And
we
then
control the length and the type, everything.
there's two questions by one of our students. So the first is, I'm wondering, based on your research, how realistic is it for most second language speakers to reach 0.8 to 0.9 score?
How realistic? I mean, as we know, when it comes to accents or a pronunciation improvement, motivation makes a huge difference, right? There are many other factors that can influence our L2 speech improvement. So I can't say to what extent we can reach or we cannot reach. Of course, when you talk about critical period hypothesis, you will say you can never reach native-like accents. When we talk about intelligibility, how clear your speech is, how well people understand your speech. But then if you have a very high motivation, I've noticed some people are actually reaching their goal a lot faster than others. So I don't think it's such a straightforward phenomenon. It varies from individuals to individuals, from context to context, from goals to goals. One thing at least we can say as a pronunciation scholar is that if you set a realistic goal, like I want to sound like an American speaker, I would like to sound or make my speech intelligible. I like to correct my certain sounds because everyone misunderstands with XYZ. So you try to make that part intelligible and take one step at a time. I think that could be helpful and more realistic perhaps. But again, just broadly by saying, oh, I like to reach 99%. We don't know what 99% means, you know? And sometimes some people can have an interesting accent, but people may understand that person quite clearly. So it's all about, you know, you being able to communicate successfully with an interlocutors in a certain context, perhaps, if that makes sense.
Okay, so another question. This is about the AI feedback. So the question is, as AI tools become more common in pronunciation teaching, could relying on them too heavily risk reinforcing a kind of algorithmic standard English? And so how do we keep a space for linguistic diversity while still helping learners become intelligible?
So if I understood that question correctly, you know, maybe we want to find out, you know, should we rely on AI constantly, or, you know, how do we efficiently use this AI?
Yeah,
perhaps?
I think that's the spirit of the question. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, when it comes to AI use, AI is evolving constantly, right? But AI is not human-like. You know, I attended some AI sessions recently, and I found out that AI becomes replacement of standardized patients. Doctors don't need usually when doctors are trained, they have standardized patients. Now AI is apparently replacing that, and you are interacting with an AI. But then when you really look at that AI, it's never human-like. I shared AI feedback. It's never human-like. So we went through 5 different training processes to make it like human-like. But eventually, teachers were there to correct this AI's feedback. I don't think AI can just show up one day by saying, I replace everything, I do humans' job. It has to be constant iterations with humans. So that it could be efficient enough to help us. So when we have different diversities for needs and different accents, like I said, AI processes, at least so far, seems to process certain accents better than others. But we know there's a flashback effects in the high variability phonetic trainings. If learners are exposed to different accents, eventually they improve their perception skills, right? So whether learners like it or not, whether AIs can do it or not, we probably have to introduce different varieties for the flashback effects and instructional goals. So for me, how we can do it, maybe at this point, constantly being updated on current movements, constantly try to understand what can help our learners. And sometimes maybe technology and AIs are so good and it's going to do such a good job, but my own countries and my own teaching context, I have zero access to any of those, So we also have to think about the realistic aspects of it. One last thing is one study I did 2 years ago with IELTS support. We asked IELTS test takers what kind of technology they are using to prepare for IELTS test. We noticed people in the States have so much access to technology, so they can use it. People in EFL context, they don't have access. They would love to do it, they don't have access. Also, advanced proficiency learners tend to use technologies more than beginners. So there are a lot of variations that we can't control. So I think once again, coming back to this technology AI issues, we should be probably more receptive and creative. Maybe that's an answer. I don't know. But I see those challenges myself.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Chung has a question. I'm going to read it, unless you want to read it yourself.
Well, I didn't see it, Sal. I was relying on you.
No, I mean,
that's me. Yes.
Hi,
Dr. Kang.
Oh, May. Hello. Yes.
Yeah, long time no see.
Long time no see.
Very exciting works that I've always learning a lot from you. So I know that there's lots of work done on training learners and helping them to improve their intelligibility, and that's great. But you also mentioned that communication is 2 ways. So we have to also make the other side more acceptable to different language varieties. And given the global context and everything that's going on right now, how can we help the other side to be more understandable? I think that's also very important. Are you aware of any work done on training listeners?
Well, Dongmei, that was my AAAL talk actually last year. Yes, indeed, I do spend a lot of time training listeners with various different approaches. Trying to adopt some social psychology theories like context theory, dissonance theories, or even linguistic trainings. So for example, you can go through as a listener, going through some linguistic varieties of certain accents and try to better understand that. That could be a linguistic approach. You can have a good time with a certain backgrounds of speakers and try to have a better understanding of that accented speaker. So that could be more context hypothesis based. You can, get trained about, more direct approach by hearing, having an accent is bad, having a bad stereotyping is bad, linguistic discrimination is bad. So you get trained about what is bad and what is good. And then it looks like that could help. Also, one of my PhD students is doing patient training for international doctors, because patients also have some issues with certain international doctors, right? Then we tell patients, look at these doctors, he has a fantastic background, he's extremely successful. So we intentionally train these patients. Rather than the linguistic parts, we actually give them additional background information. Then these patients seem to do better as well. So those are the issues. But one reason studies I read is AI can be trained for that as well. AI can be taught by saying, the implicit bias, the AI can take this implicit bias test and then tell them this is bad, and then, try to improve. So who knows what's gonna be possible in the future. But I guess what we can do is, what I noticed is, if people are aware of the other side, the listeners, the importance of listeners and the listeners' responsibility, not as an individual, but as an institution. And then if they try to introduce more institutional training programs, talking about these issues at a freshman orientation sessions, talking about these issues in the, English 105 anthropology classes, we've seen much more impactful results coming out faster. So perhaps this is not just the one, research type approaches. It should be more policy related, institution related efforts that we could probably do to make changes. But yes, indeed, learners feel much better about sharing responsibility ideas if we tell them it's not your fault. The listeners are having a problems. Your speech is totally okay. They love to hear that and they feel empowered. So I think this kind of efforts in both sides would be recommended.
Yeah, I love that. That's validation theory. And we really want our learners to feel empowered. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're out of time. So Dr. Pickering, would you like to wrap things up? I did post in the chat information on how to get the recording of this lecture if you would like it.
And me too. I put my email in there too. Okim, as always, you're a total star. The speed at which you do research is astonishing. It's like, and then there's this study, and then there's that study, and now we're just putting out that study. So I am just so delighted for you, your colleagues, and your graduate students that have such a wonderful experience working in this program with you. I want to thank you so much for doing this. It's extremely meaningful for us. And again, thank you so much. And thank you to every, and thank you to every, look at Dongmei's little hearts. I love those little hearts. And yes, we thank you to everybody that came today, and your ongoing support to the scholarship that we have in Shige's name. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Okim.
Thank you.
Bye.